heart said together, amen. I invite you to stand as we receive our text for the morning, which comes to us from the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verses 20 through 22. Reading from the New Revised Standard Translation of the text, we hear these words. Listen, I am standing at the door knocking. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to you and eat with you and you with me. To the one who conquers, I will give a place with me on my throne, just as myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Thus ends the reading of the word. Amen. I want to put a tag on this text and talk just for a few moments from the subject, the fundamentals of fellowship. The fundamentals of fellowship. The itinerant preacher E.A. Hoffman has given us a great gift of not only melody, but also theology. The musical minister penned these great lines. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Speaking of the vertical and not the horizontal relationship, Hoffman hit the proverbial nail on the head with a profound recognition. Quite simply put, we as earthbound creatures, we need the Lord. It has been said by some commentators of the human experience that religion is for weak people. And even Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the people. It is the sigh of the oppressed, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of our soulless conditions. What Marx and others did not recognize is that true religion is not an opiate, but an opportunity predicated on recognition, namely, we need the Lord. I wonder, as you look around the world and you survey the landscape of your life, is there anybody that's willing to confess, I need the Lord? Not so much that the world needs the Lord, Congress needs the Lord, but I need the Lord. I need God in every aspect of my life. I need God in church, but I also need God on my job. I need God in my home, but I also need God in my parenting. I need God in my business, but I also need God in government. And I need God in school. I need the Lord. Not only do I need God in everything, but I also need God for everything. I need God for the healing of my body, for peace of mind, for protection in these mean streets. I need God for joy in my soul and light in my worship. I need God for power in my proclamation. I need God to give me love in my heart. I need God to give me strength in my struggle. I need God to give me direction on this journey called life. I need God. See, I ain't smart enough to negotiate the terms of life. I'm not wise enough to know right from wrong all the time. I'm not strong enough to bear all of my burdens by myself. I'm not savvy enough to get over all of the time. And I'm not bold enough to be courageous when a witness for God is needed at a critical hour. Yeah. Beloved, we need God. Let me put you on blast. When you recognize your dependency on God, your behavior, mood, and attitude changes. For when you recognize that you need God, you're not anesthetized, but you're mobilized, because you realize in that moment that my weakness is God's opportunity to demonstrate mighty strength. And with God, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yes, we need the Lord. And that's why Hoffman said, what a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on everlasting arms. Have you ever been there when you couldn't make it through? You just had to lean. Have you ever been there when you didn't think you could finish, but you had to lean? Have you ever been there when you didn't know how you were going to make it? You just had to lean. You weren't strong enough. You weren't wise enough. You weren't big and bad enough. You just had to depend on the Lord. That's what we come as a foundational proposition for all of God's people. We need God in everything and for everything. But what happens in life when we fail the dependency test, especially from folks that should know better? And that's the terrible trend that we see in the text today. But this is a church that this text is grounded and given to the notorious church of Laodicea, of the 7 churches of Asia Minor in the book of Revelation. And they demonstrated a pernicious proclivity, a deadly trend that caused them to lose their life and become a listless people. They said to themselves, to God and to the world, we are rich and we need nothing. They suffered from a disabling independence. Their mantra and their ethos was, we got this. And whenever you come to life's moments and you think you got it, without the help of the divine, you've lost something essential for life. The Laodiceans were a community and a church of vast resources. They were known for having a medicinal eye salve that could cure eye problems, and people from all over the Roman Empire flocked to Laodicea just to get a little ointment for hurting eyes. They were known for their textile manufacturing, for producing a fine cloth that was a rival of any clothing center in the universe. They made fine jewelry out of gold and silver, which was rivaled by few in the Roman Empire. But because they relied on their stuff, they had a temperature problem in the church. There was a sickening, tepid temperature to the Christian witness. For the Bible here says that they were neither, as Jesus makes his assessment, they were neither hot nor cold. He said, I wish you were one or the other. I can deal with hot Christians. In fact, that's where I really want you, because when you got some heat, then you got light and you got power. And I can deal with you if you're cold, because I know how to heat you up. But when you get lukewarm, that becomes a sickening posture to the divine, worthy of regurgitation. I'll spit you out of my mouth. It becomes sickening when we have such a tepid relationship, for that does God no good at all. They did all of the religious things, but there was no light, no presence, or no power. They were lukewarm. They came to church, but nobody was moved. They preached the gospel, but nobody got saved. They sang with fervor, but nobody shouted. They served, their service was orderly, but nobody got changed. Their outreach ministries were generous, but nobody came inquiring, what must I do to be saved? They were simply lukewarm. They checked the boxes of religious obligation week after week, year after year, but because they had a temperature problem, nothing changed. They had The Laodiceans had a religious engine without the presence of the eternal. They had ritual, but no relationship. They had proclamation, but no power. They had worship, but no presence of the divine. They had service without any redemption. And beloved, when you lose the light of God among the presence of God's people, then you've got to ask yourself, why do I go to church in the first place? If I can't find any help for my hurting, ain't no need of me going. If I can't find any hope in my despair, there's no need of me wasting my time down there. If I can't find any direction when I'm lost, there's no need of my going to the place called church. You see, the Laodiceans were guilty of one major sin. They left God out. And before you become condescending, you do recognize it's easy to leave God out. A self-reliance is a sure way of eradicating the eternal presence. For God doesn't show up where God is not wanted or needed. Let me put that again. God doesn't show up where God is not needed or God is not wanted. So the question before you today is, where have you eased God out? Where have you just left the Lord hanging? Where have you gone on with your bad black self, thinking that you're smart enough to direct your course and left God out? Where have you left God out? And however you answer that question, I have some good news. For while we may have put God out, God is still trying to gain entry. For I hear Jesus on the outside of the community, eased out by convenience and expediency, say, behold, I stand at the door and I'm knocking, trying to get in. If anyone hears my voice, old King James says, I'll come in and sup with you and you sup with me. I'm knocking at your door, trying to get in. You left me out of the equation, but I want in. You pushed me out, but I want a prominent place. You left me and forsake me, but I need to be in where you are. See, beloved, that's what the master says. Listen, I'm standing at the door, knocking. And this knocking carries with it three assertions. One, the knock signifies an alert. In other words, pay attention to who's knocking. You see, beloved, sometimes we live life cluelessly. We go about our daily routines without any sensitivity, cognizance, or awareness of the divine presence. But Jesus tells the church, listen, or as the old King James says, behold. In other words, I'm trying to get your attention. You got to pay attention if you want to have God in the center of where you are, because God is always trying to get our attention so that God can have a preeminent place in our daily lives. Pay attention. The knock is an alert. God has some unique ways of knocking. Sometimes we attribute them to demonic forces, but it's really God knocking. How many times have you been sick and you seem like you couldn't get well? But that's God's way of knocking, telling you you need to slow down, rest a little bit. How many times have you been unemployed? And that's God's way of just saying, I'm knocking because I want to show you how much I'm trustworthy. When you don't have anything, I can still be trusted. How many times has God knocked on your door in a strange way, trying to get your attention? Behold, listen, I stand at the door knocking. The knock carries with it an alert, but it also carries with it an alternative. Hear the text. If you hear and if you open, then I will come in. You missed it. If. The whole clause is contingent upon the power of if, suggesting to us that you have a choice in the matter. You can keep the door closed or you can open it wide open. The choice is yours. Let God in or keep God out. The choice is yours. And we all know, beloved, that whenever you let the Lord in, things will surely change, because there is a reorienting of realities and there is a renewal of what's really important. How is it that the church can worship and forget about God? How is it that we can function as people and forget about God? And you see, I'm not talking about some flimsy and empty kind of legislation where we think that if we just put prayer back in school, that everything is going to be solved. Children are going to sit down and behave just because they prayed in the morning. Well, here's what I'll tell you, beloved. If you recognize you need God, you don't need a law to tell you when to pray. For every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I'll pray. You can't legislate that. They might tell you you can't put your Bible on your desk at work in the federal government, but I heard the master say that if you hide his word in your heart, you'll always have a guide on the thermostat to direct you and lead you. You don't need a legislative body or act to tell you when to pray, but every time I need God, I can choose to relate to the eternal. Behold, I stand at the door and I'm knocking. If anyone opens the door and hears me, what choice will you make? Will you choose to let him in? That's the wise choice. That's the prudent possibility. Or do we continue on this listless, lifeless course of action where we go through ritual and routine without the power and the presence of the divine? You know, there are times in life when people can look at you and they may not know your denominational affiliation. They may not know what church you attend. But if you've been connected to the holy, they will know that you are a Christian. And somebody will come up and say, are you a follower of the way? Are you a Christian? Are you a minister? There's something about the children of God when they get connected to the holy that we become identifiable to a world that needs power. We have in this knock an alert, an alternative, but also an assurance. If anyone chooses to open the door, I will come in and we'll have a fellowship that is predicated on mutuality. I'm going to eat with you and you'll eat with me. There's a mutuality in the relationship. You see, not all relationships are predicated upon mutuality. Some relationships are predatory. And you got some folks in your life that the only time they come around is when you get paid, when you get blessed, when things are going right for you. But let the bottom fall out, and you can't find those folks nowhere, no time, because they're like leeches that are sucking you dry and leaving you with no life or no force. Some relationships are only for the moment, for they give you what you need in that moment, and then they dissipate. And we expect some relationships to last forever, which they are not designed to do. But when there is a relationship that is mutual, it really becomes a fellowship. Because now we become fellows in the ship. We become those who are giving and taking equally. And when we can't give and take equally, then you got what I need in the moment, but I'm going to have what you need when you need me. I'm going to be there in a situation of mutuality. I'll come in and we'll establish a dinner of fellowship. I'm going to eat with you. And I'm not going to just eat up everything on the table, but you're going to have something to eat as well. Beloved, that's the way God is. God doesn't come into situations where God is not invited. And when God comes not just to consume, but God comes to bless. I'm going to sit down with you. You're going to sit down with me. And what is the picture? We both sitting together. I'm going to eat with you, and you'll dine with me. What is the picture, the metaphor? Is we're there in mutuality and in fellowship. And beloved, whenever God comes into your life, God comes not to be a hindrance, but to be a blessing in everything that you do. Sometimes the blessings may come in odd and peculiar ways. Sometimes the blessing comes through hurt. Sometimes it comes through pain. But whenever God is present, God's desire is always for your best interest to be actualized. I wonder, is there anybody here, if you look over your life, that can say, I know the Lord will bless you because he's blessed me. He's brought me through some tough times, and he's brought me through some low valleys, and he's brought me through some sick rooms. He's brought me through court. I know the Lord will bless me. It ain't always been easy, but I made it because the Lord was right there with me. If you let him in, then wherever the Christ is invited, he changes the atmosphere and sets new tones, because he then becomes the focus of the relationship. Y'all ain't feeling me? Whenever Jesus is allowed in, because we forgot him in too many things, but whenever he comes in, he changes the atmosphere. He sets a new tone because he becomes the center of attention. And whenever the Lord becomes the center of attention, then matters of importance and relevance are all directed toward him and emanate from him. God then becomes the center of our joy, the center of our worship, the center of our work, the center of all that we do, if we simply let him in. Let me see if I can put some legs on this thing so that it walks through the corridors of your consciousness. One year early in my ministry, in my first pastorate, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a Martin Luther King celebration on a military installation. And it was one of the toughest speaking engagements I've ever had because I'm not a keynote speaker. I'm a preacher. And if I stand to talk, then I'm going to talk about God. And so it was a tough moment because I had to transition to become something different. And when I walked into the hall, there was a frivolity and lightness in the air because it was a Martin Luther King celebration. All of the African American servicemen and women of rank were allowed to come to the banquet. And they sat me at the table with the other dignitaries. But they seated me next to an empty chair. And I'm wondering, why is everybody seated and there's an empty chair? They said to me, that's if the general chooses to attend. The empty chair is for the general. The open seat is for the general. And the general could find it in his schedule that day to show up. And when he showed up, everything then was directed now at him because he became the center of attention. He was the one who changed the atmosphere because now his presence signified that the day was important. His presence gave notice to the whole military installation that this event mattered because he bothered to show up. And that's the way the Lord is when you let him in any situation. He then becomes the center of the attention so that now the focus can no longer be on the problem, but the pathway out. The focus of attention is no longer on what's wrong, but how we can make things better. The focus of attention is no longer on the trouble, but it's on the triumphant one who's already fought the battle and won the victory. But in the change of atmosphere, the general set a new tone. It was the oddest thing, and I still remember it as if it were yesterday. Because it was a Martin Luther King function, of course, they had soul food. They had fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, and greens. And here you had a whole bunch of black folks trying to be dignified by eating fried chicken with a knife and a fork. It was one of the most awkward things that I've ever experienced, for my natural inclination said, just pick the chicken up and enjoy the bird. But I had to maintain some decorum because I knew where I was. But when the general sat down, he said, I'm from Texas, and the way we eat chicken is we pick it up. When he picked up his chicken, it gave everybody else around the table permission to pick up. He set a new tone and a new course of direction by allowing us to be ourselves. And when the Lord shows up, he allows you to set a new tone of direction so that you can find yourself and be who you really are. Praise be to God that when he comes, I learned something about the divine presence, but I also learned who I am. Who are you? You've been bought with a price. Who are you? You're the king's kids. Who are you? You're more than conquerors through Christ who loves you. Who are you? You're royal priesthood. Who are you? You're the apple of his eye. Who are you? I'm a child of the Most High King. If anybody asks you who I am, tell them that I'm a child of the King. So beloved, when you let him in, will you let him in today? Will you let God in your life? Will you let God in your home? Will you let God in your relationships and your dealings with other people? Because when you understand I need the Lord, that's when you go to the head of the class and you pass the dependency test, because you matriculated at the University of I need thee every hour and every day, every second, every minute, every hour, every week, every month, every year, every decade. Is there anybody here that just needs the Lord? I need you to stop by and bless my home. I need you to stop by, bless my business. I need you to stop by where the doctor can't do anything. I need you to stop by and give me a little peace of mind. I need you to stop by, give me a little strength from a struggle. I need you to stop by, because we got a fellowship that's predicated on my need. No wonder the songwriter said, what a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on his everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near, because I'm just leaning on his everlasting arms. No matter what comes, I tell you to lean on the Lord's everlasting arms. Arms that'll hold you up in times of difficulty. Arms that are strong, that'll never drop you in times of testing. Arms that are mighty enough to correct you and steer you when you're wrong. Lean. I said lean. Oh, lean on the everlasting arms that'll hold you up. Won't he do it? I said, won't he do it? Won't he hold you up when you're about to fall? Won't he do it? Somebody ought to help me. I know the Lord will hold me up. Because we got a fellowship. We got a fellowship that's predicated on my need for the divine. And whenever you recognize your need for God, the focus changes. And he redirects by setting a new atmosphere. You can eat your chicken with your fingers. You can dance in freedom. You can praise unrestrained. You can lift up your hands in adoration and gratitude. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of you, because I know the Lord and what he's done for me. He's done so many wonderful things. I cannot tell it all. There may be somebody here today that needs to allow the master in. You've been trying to navigate the tempestuous seas of life, with your own navigational skills, only to find that the storms, the winds, are greater than your ability. But when you got somebody on board who can control wind and waves simply by the power of his word, peace, be still, you'll discover that you can make it to the other side. You can endure, you can get through. So if there is one today that needs to just invite God in, we invite you to make that decision now. Choose you this day a wise choice. Choose the alternative, for self-reliance will only yield failure and disaster. But there is another way, a more excellent way in the Lord. If there's one here in the house today, if there's one online, we invite you to make use of the number at the bottom of the screen. Put it in the chat that I want to become a child of God. I've been my own child, I've been my own boss, but now I want to surrender and give myself away to one whose arms are strong enough to hold me in the test of life. If there's one today, won't you come? God, help you to come as we extend the invitation to Christian discipleship. Spirit says, come. The bride of Christ, the church, says, come. And the invitation is all encompassing. Whomsoever will, let him or her come. If there are those today, this is the moment. As our choir gives us music commensurate to this moment, whomsoever will, let him or her come.
Not a second, nor another minute, not an hour or another day, but at this moment, with my arms outstretched, I need you to make a way as you have done so many times before. Through a window or an open door, I stretch my hands to thee. Come rescue me. I need you right away. I need you now.